Hello, my name is Doug Sharpe, and I'm the host of the National Leadership Briefing. It is good to be with you again today. Welcome to all of the new participants on the briefing today. There is a rather large number of you. We are happy that you're here. That's what it's all about, is growing the number of people that join us here so we can raise the level of influence that we have here in our nation on the issues that we feel are important. And of course, those are the four pillars. If you're not familiar with those, you're going to find out all about those shortly. So here on the briefing today for the new folks, I just wanted to spend a few minutes here welcoming you and actually sharing with you some advice. This is a very, very fast moving train and you have just jumped on it. And I want to make sure that you're off to a good start. So what I'm going to do is make a suggestion. At the end of every national leadership briefing, for those folks who are registered to be on the briefing, whether they're able to make it on the briefing or not, of course, they, at the end of the day, receive something called the post-briefing notes. And it comes to you in the form of an email. You're going to receive at the end of today an email with a video of this briefing along with all of the resources that we referenced during the briefing. Well, there's one other thing I'm going to include today in the post-briefing notes for all of the new participants on the briefing today, and that is some links to some valuable information that will very quickly bring you up to speed as to what's just recently gone on and where we're coming from and help clarify where we're going to. So let me just tell you quickly what I'm going to include for you. First of all, I'm going to include the January 2020 National Leadership Briefing. It's a video that I'd like you to watch because it helps set the foundation for what we want to accomplish this year in 2020 on the briefing every month. The second thing I'm going to include for you is a link to the February 7th 2020 briefing. And the reason why I want to include that one is because that is the month that we launched something called Operation Engage and the conservativeupdate.com website. Here on the briefing, we're always looking for opportunities on the horizon where we can exercise our influence. Well, I found one and we shared it in a big way on the February briefing, and I want to make sure that you're aware of what that is, what the conservativeupdate.com website's all about in detail. Now, today, we're going to be talking about it later on when we get into the boardroom, but I do want you to have the background information of some of the strategy behind it. So definitely watch that second link. I'm also going to be sending to you two other links. And the two other web links that I'm going to send you are to short videos that are the midweek touch points. So we get together on the National Leadership Briefing once a month, but we also send out brief videos midweek every week just to touch base with you, to actually bring you up to speed on anything new that's coming up, and just to keep us in relationship and making sure the information's flowing. But we covered some really important information on the last two midweek touch points. I want to make sure the new folks get that information as well. So look for those links in the post briefing notes. Now, for those of you who've been on the briefings before, we are still going to be sending out in those post-briefing notes the registration link so you can continue to share the briefing with other people. Of course, again, that's how we grow. We grow our influence by growing our numbers. And every single month, we'd ask you to send out information and send out those registration links so we get more and more people on the briefing. So we'll make sure all of that regular information is always there. But those new folks, please keep an eye for the new information as well. Okay, so we are getting together every single month here on the National Leadership Briefing. We want to grow our numbers so that we can have influence. Close your eyes for a second and imagine that a year from now has passed and we have continued to grow and we've continued to grow and we continue to increase our influence, and then wham, there's an opportunity, another opportunity pops up in front of us. Well, it could, what might that opportunity look like? Well, it might be an opportunity for us to, like we're pursuing right now, to elect a politician to a key position here in Canada. And let's say we've got 500,000, 1 million people on the briefing, and all of a sudden an opportunity pops up for us to influence that decision. Well, we're already in relationship and we're used to getting together and we're talking about the things that we share in common, and it's easy for us to mobilize because we're already in motion. And all you had to do was contribute 1 hour once a month to getting together, touching base, and staying in relationship. That's all it took. Well, what happens when an opportunity comes up, like a piece of legislation comes through the House of Commons, and all of a sudden there's an opportunity for us to rise up and say, hey, I don't know if we like that one, or hey, I really do like that one. And it gives us an opportunity to make our voices heard, to either support or reject a piece of legislation that goes through the House of Commons. Well, the reason why I'm mentioning that right now is that we have an opportunity right now. And now, great, I mean, we do have some influence. We have got rather large numbers, but we're not where we want to be. But we have an opportunity right now in the House of Commons to express our support for a piece of legislation that I'm going to be bringing to your attention over the course of the next months. We have a member of parliament by the name of Kathy Wagenthal, and she is a Conservative Party of Canada member of parliament who has put forward a bill related to sex-selective abortion. Now, there's a petition, there's a news release, and there's information that I'm going to share with you today in the post-briefing notes, just to give you an idea as to the kind of sway we can have once we get in this large critical mass group of people and we all want to express our views in areas like pieces of legislation, we want to support them. So that's what I'm going to share with you today in the post-briefing notes. You're even going to have a petition that you're going to be able to share in your networks and actually get support for that member of parliament's piece of legislation, so that she knows that you're out there and you support restricting abortion just because of the genetic sex of the baby that's in the womb. That is not a good enough reason to have an abortion, and this is a piece of legislation that'll deal with that. So here we go. We're gonna do that. But remember, as we're moving through this year, imagine what we can accomplish if we stay together, stick together, come together, put all of the things aside that we differ on, and we start speaking with one voice on issues like this piece of legislation. Okay, so now what are we rallying around here? We're rallying around the 4 pillars on the National Leadership Briefing. We're going to go straight into that. For those who've been on the call before, you know we always talk about the 4 pillars. Well, today we're going to do it a little bit differently, because just recently I had the absolute pleasure of joining Faytine on her television program, where she actually shared for her television audience the information about the 4 pillars through an interview that she did with me. We're going to take a look at segments of that interview today, and that's how we're going to cover the 4 pillars. So enjoy Faytine. I mean, hey, doesn't that just add that splash of color? And reviewing what we're doing here on the National Leadership Briefing, here is Faytine and her television program that we just taped recently in Toronto. Here it is. Enjoy.
Welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about democracy and 4 pillars that will make it stronger in Canada with the host of the National Leadership Briefing, Doug Sharpe.
I got this impression that I was supposed to help people vote. I had never voted before in my life at that point, so I had to learn everything. And I realized that through this journey that there's a lot of people out there just like me that don't really know what to do. And over the last 20 years, that's what I've done, is spent all my time helping other people have influence in this realm. As the world is right now, the lone wolf out there, the individual, can only have so much influence. We really do need to come together to use our combined voice.
One of the most common questions that we get asked is, what can we do? Well, this is precisely why I am excited about today's show. With me in studio is Doug Sharpe, the host of something called the National Leadership Briefing. Doug has been involved at the grassroots level in Canada for years. He has served in nonprofit advocacy work on major political campaigns, as a member of several EDA boards, and as a civic engagement trainer in churches, and the list goes on. Most recently, Doug has been mentoring Canadians and how to strengthen 4 key pillars that he believes are key to our nation's future. You may want to grab a pen and paper if you want to be a part of the change that our nation needs. I know that you will find Doug's insights very helpful and practical. So without further delay, let's get to it. Well, Doug, it's so great to have you in studio with me today. So you're the host of the National Leadership Briefing. And on this briefing, it's a call that happens once a month, you've been talking about something called the 4 pillars. Where did that come from? What is that all about?
Well, that's an exciting story because over the years, what I had done is I'd worked for many years working to mobilize people in the church into the realm of politics and government. And I was really trying to awaken in them the reality of the fact that they had influence in these spheres that they could exercise and that they could impact the decisions of civil government and that they could impact the outcomes of political processes like elections. And I really wasn't having the kind of traction that I felt like I wanted to have to the degree that I wanted to have. So back in the fall of 2016, I started to survey the people that we were serving in the church. I started asking them, I said, look, if you don't really want to talk so much about what we want to talk about, you tell me what your priorities are and the things that you want us to focus on. And out of those conversations and surveys came these 4 pillars. And it was quite exciting because as I echoed back to them what I was hearing from them, they were getting really excited that they were being heard, that somebody was actually talking to them about the things that were important to them.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's talk about pillar number 1. What is it?
Wow. Pillar number 1, and pillar number 1 is the first pillar for a reason, because by a long shot, the feedback we got from the church and the leaders in the church and the people in the pews was that they really just wanted to have, as parents, the right to raise their children the way they wanted. That's all they cared about, to a high degree, way beyond any other pillar. They just wanted to be able to raise their children with the same faith tradition and in the same way that they were raised. And to have that freedom to do it was really important to them. So that's the first pillar.
And how chilling that people would express that, obviously, out of reading a bit of the court, that this is under threat.
Yes.
So
yeah,
very telling. Very telling.
Absolutely.
So let's see. We're going to skip pillar number 2 because we're going to come back to it after the break. But let's go to pillar number 3. What is it? Heart of it?
Well, pillar number 3 really is the heart. What I think is the heart of the church. It's the people that I spoke to were saying that they really wanted the laws and policies that were enacted and passed by civil government to provide for the safety and security of the citizens. But there was a caveat. They also had a particular passion in their heart, or compassion in their heart, for the vulnerable that live among us in our communities. So the civil government passing laws that provided for the safety and security of the citizens, but especially the vulnerable, was really important to the church. And anytime I brought them a solution that would provide for that or help advance that idea, they got real excited about it and they wanted to get involved.
Wow, how beautiful is that? And again, how telling, because I think sometimes Christians in Canada get branded as, sort of being anti-abortion, anti-this. But what that pillar shows is a real heart of compassion.
Absolutely.
For the vulnerable. And I'm assuming we're talking senior citizens, we're talking the disabled, we're talking children.
Absolutely.
The poor. Beautiful. Pillar number 4, what is it?
Well, pillar number 4 was a bit of a no-brainer for me, but it was surprising again when I echoed it back to them. We always hear about the amount of debt that civil government is taking on. Civil governments have continually spent more money than they have. In Ontario, it's out of control. Nationally, the money is being spent way beyond what we're taking in. Well, the people that we surveyed really felt that, and I'm going to use their language, that it is inappropriate for civil government to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. They looked at the debt crisis in Canada from the perspective of their children being born into their world as bond servants of civil government. They wanted their children to be free. They didn't want their children to have that yoke of excessive taxation placed on them. So as soon as I started, because we've been talking about government debt for a long time, but as soon as I started saying, well, what you're telling me is that government debt is important to you, but only to the degree that it impacts your children. And they went, yes, that's what I'm really concerned about. And that was really an eye-opener as well.
Wow, and again, beautiful, because it shows just the heart for the other, right?
Yes.
And so those are 3 of the 4. We're going to come back to number 2 in a second here. But what are you telling people to do with this? So you've identified these 3 pillars. What then?
Well, and that's exactly the challenge, is because it's one thing to understand that those are your ideas and that they can have traction and you can actually have favor in the community when you share those ideas. But how do you articulate them in a way that gathers support around them? Because as
as the world is right now, the lone wolf out there, the individual, can only have so much influence. We really do need to come together to use our combined voice when we speak to issues like this. So what we do is we actually teach people how to bring support in larger numbers around your ideas, gather them together, gather the people around you, and speak in a unified way so you have more influence as a group. That's what we've been doing on the National Leadership Briefing.
That is so powerful. And the reality is almost every other community in our nation does that at some level of organization. You know, I heard
They're very good at it, yes.
I heard somebody say once that leaders give articulation to the silent groan of the masses. If that's true, you're a great leader, Doug. You're given. So, pillar 2. I'm going to read word for word off of the website. Those we elect to service in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion.
The entombment of Christians is what I believe we're heading towards, and I believe that what's happening is that in our Charter of Rights, we have that preamble that we always focus on where it says the supremacy of God and the rule of law, and we celebrate that in our 1982 Charter. We go straight to Section 2 of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and we celebrate the freedom of religion and freedom of conscience and freedom of speech, and we skip past the all-important Section 1. And Section 1 of the Charter says that all of the rights that are outlined in the Charter are actually subject to the laws that are passed by our lawmakers. So the laws that we pass in our Parliament, they are able to limit our rights. So the rights in the Charter can be sort of held back. This is what's happening is that you're seeing court cases, you're seeing laws that are passed that are limiting our rights, and we're actually slowly we're getting our rights of free speech limited to take place only in our churches. That's what I mean by entombing of Christians in the church under the laws that are being passed in Parliament.
Wow.
Very concerning.
And so what are you coaching people to do in response to this?
Well, the very best place to tackle this is actually at election time, because we encourage our people to do things a little bit different on the National Leadership Briefing. We don't ask them to run around at election time and ask their politicians to make them promises. What we do is we ask them to ask their politicians and their candidates to make commitment statements. And the commitment statements are grounded in the 4 pillars. Everything that we do on the National Leadership Briefing, we do through the lens of the 4 pillars, we say. So on that issue of the second pillar, we make sure that our people get commitment statements from members of Parliament that they will not, if elected, the candidates, if they go to the House of Commons, they will not pass laws that in any way disrespect their right of belief. And we actually want them to make a commitment to defend right of belief when they're there, because that's a big problem right now. That's why it says in the second pillar, we want them to respect and defend, because a lot of parliamentarians think it's okay to sit in their seats in the House of Commons as we're getting attacked, as our right of belief is being attacked. And we don't believe that that's what the citizens of Canada want. We want parliamentarians that will fight. And so that's the time we're in right now.
Okay. Now, in the first segment, you talked about moving as a corporate voice, right? Moving together as a community that believe in these 4 pillars. And so the National Leadership Briefing is a monthly contact point for that. How do people get connected with it?
Well, you go to nlbcanada.ca, and there's a registration link, and you just register, and then once a month you're sent a link to a Zoom call, and you can join the call with us. You just come on and join. And what we encourage people to do is, even though it sounds a little repetitious at first, we say, no, get on the call, try it a couple of times, invite a couple of friends, have them invite a couple of friends, bring more and more people on, and what you'll find is over time is you're building an understanding of the 4 pillars that we teach, and you're also not just learning the 4 pillars, you're actually drilling and training using the 4 pillars to gather support around the ideas in your community as well. And then of course we encourage also for people to share the National Leadership Briefing so we get more and more people all talking about the same things on the same page.
And now it's a daytime call though, Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. if people work during the day, can they still get in on this somehow?
Absolutely. At the National Leadership Briefing, we do the call during the day. And then if you're registered for the call and you can't make the call at that time, you're sent an email at the end of the day that has the video of the call, plus all of the resources that we've shared during the call. So if that day we're talking about right now, a big subject is the Conservative Party leadership race, then we'll make sure that they have all of the resources available for that attached to their email so they don't miss a thing.
Okay, so Doug, we got 15 seconds left here. Why don't you look in the camera over here? What is your word of encouragement to Canada at this time?
For this year, it's engage. Don't hold back. Now is not the time. If you're waiting for the perfect time to have great influence in Canada, you couldn't have waited till a better time than right now. We have an opportunity in front of us right now in Canada to have great influence, but we got to come together, and that's going to mean separating and putting aside some of our differences and just focusing on the things we share in common.
Well, I could not have said that better myself. So here we are. Thank you so much, Fatine. That was just a real treat to be able to spend time with you. I am so looking forward to working with you again in the future. Until then, be blessed. Now, on the immediate road ahead here, though, Fatine also mentioned something to me about an event that she is hosting in Toronto called the Canada Summit. And I want to make sure that you have this information. So we're actually going to have Fatine tell us a little bit about the Canada Summit as we segue into the boardroom, where we're going to do some training and review some very important information about euthanasia legislation that's coming up. And also we're going to talk about conservativeupdate.com. But first, let's go to Fatine and have her tell us a little bit more about the Canada Summit that she is hosting in Toronto this June 12th and 13th. See you in the boardroom.
June 2020, something incredible is happening. The Canada Summit for National Progress. This is a strategic gathering for people who love Canada and want to see it reach its full potential. At the summit, you will hear from knowledgeable speakers who are experts in their fields, giving insight into some of our nation's biggest challenges. Then together, participants will dream and strategize, looking for ideas to solve these challenges through policies, inventions, innovations, or community initiatives. Some of these ideas will be launched right at the summit to impact the lives of Canadians for the better. We believe that the Canada Summit for National Progress could be one of the most significant transformational gatherings in our nation. Canada needs people who can face problems head on, but then look past them with a spirit of hope to find the solutions. We hope you'll join for this cutting-edge gathering of dreamers, innovators, and doers. Let's build a better Canada for the future. Toronto, June 2020. To find out more or register, visit canadasummit.ca. Register soon as capacity is limited and optional VIP networking events are expected to sell out. www.canadasummit.ca.
Well, it's good to be back in the boardroom with you. Thank you so much for taking this time in particular, because I know this isn't fun. I know sometimes we get together in the boardroom, it's work. This is where the work starts for a lot of people. But you know what? I'm going to try and make this as painless as possible for you. But we do have some heavy lifting to do today. We have to be talking about the hard subjects as well as some of the lighter ones. But today it's a bit of a hard subject because the government of Canada is again, they're having this conversation about expanding the eligibility of euthanasia to include other people outside of the current constructs of the very, very loose policy on who is eligible for euthanasia. They want to widen it even more. So I want to make sure that we're clear on the history and some of the foundational concerns that we had before, so you know how bad it is when you start stacking bad decisions on top of previously made bad decisions. Now, to do that, we're going to start with taking a look at what our parliamentarians didn't do back in 2016 when they first legalized euthanasia. Now, like I said, we're going to get on to the subject of increasing our influence with regard to the CPC leadership election, but this is a part of that conversation. So I want to start here. So let's take a look back in 2016 and our lawmakers in Ottawa, the people we elected and we sent to Ottawa to make these decisions. What didn't they do that they were supposed to do as parliamentarians? Well, the entire Liberal caucus, except for one or two, the entire NDP caucus, and 22 members of the Conservative Party of Canada caucus all voted to support the legalization of euthanasia at third reading in the House of Commons. So believe me, there's lots of what they didn't do is important. There's lots of that to go around. But what did they not do back in 2016? And then we're going to talk about right today in a minute. First of all, what they didn't do was they didn't pause their decision. They had an opportunity when the Supreme Court decision came down that said, we need you to remove the barrier in law so that people can hasten their death and have someone assist them in that. We actually had an opportunity as lawmakers in Canada to pause that decision. We could have recognized that it was such a significant shift away from who we are and where we've been. I mean, my goodness, can you imagine a decision that is more important that a House of Commons, that a legislator could make in the House of Commons, then under what circumstances we as a nation will allow one person to hasten the death of another? I mean, I can't think of one. I've tried. I've thought about it. Is there any other conversation that we could be having that's more important than that inside the House of Commons? Yet they did not pause their decision. Now, the one thing that the Supreme Court did say, though, was they said, we want you to do this, allow for medical aid in dying, assisted death, whatever you want to call it, but we also need you to provide for the safety and security of the vulnerable. And that was a part of the Supreme Court decision, which would have given them enough credibility if they had decided to pause the decision. Another thing is that they let all their arguments, and if you were a part of that conversation back then, you'll remember this, their arguments about moving forward were all emotionally charged. They would look at the most grievous circumstances and they would use that as fuel for charging an emotional conversation that then added this need to act right away, which led them to then have the legitimacy to not pause their decision. So that's what they didn't do first off. The second thing is that they didn't adequately consider the backdrop that they were actually introducing the regime of euthanasia or legalized euthanasia into. Let me give you a couple of examples. I've got three for you. First of all, on the day that euthanasia or the euthanasia bill was passed from third reading to go into the Senate, it was announced on CTV News. There was a story that ran on CTV News that this piece of legislation was being advanced to the Senate. On the very same day that was being advanced to the Senate, there was a news story on CTV News about the rash of teen suicides that were happening on First Nation reserves in Saskatchewan. As a matter of fact, the Saskatchewan government declared a state of emergency because so many First Nations youths were actually taking their own lives. And there were some kind of suicide pacts that were going on inside of these groups of teens. So they didn't take time to adequately consider the backdrop, to consider when society has a conversation about under what circumstances it's okay to hasten death, did we take enough time to actually consider what we're modeling for our young people? Now, you might say, Doug, there's no way you can draw that connection between, the influence that a euthanasia conversation could have on teens committing suicide. You know what? I can. And I've got a personal testimony to it, which I can't share right now. But when you talk about euthanasia, trust me, and the legitimacy of hastening someone's death, it is the license that some people need to consider that conversation inside their own mind. So we did not, though, our lawmakers did not adequately consider that as part of the backdrop as to the impact it would have on our young people. The second thing that they didn't do was they didn't actually take into consideration and adequately consider what would happen when you introduce medical aid in dying into an underfunded, overtaxed medical system that exists already. In other words, our medical resources are already being stretched to their absolute maximum. Our emergency rooms, our hospitals, the number of beds that are available, palliative care ward, hospice care, we are operating at a significantly high percentage of use of all of these resources. What happens when you all of a sudden introduce euthanasia into that? Now you could say, Doug, don't go there, don't go there, don't start imagining that doctors would actually allow their minds to be going to freeing up beds to make room for people by euthanizing some to make room for others. You know what? I'm going to let you actually take a look at it yourself. It's absolutely happening right now, where they are taking a look, doctors are taking a look at the resources they've got and the number of people that are coming through the door. And when you walk into an emergency room these days, you are in triage for emergency room. I talked to one doctor, he said, you may not know it, but you're already in one line or another line. They are triaging people in emergency rooms in Canada by saying, okay, wait a second, is this a medical aid in dying patient? Or is this somebody who needs critical emergency care and they want to actually get healed from it? And they're triaging you when you are in a heightened state of frenzy and panic, and perhaps at the worst time of your life to be making decisions. They are triaging you to put you in one line or another. Did they actually adequately consider that, our legislators and our lawmakers, as to what impact euthanasia or legalized euthanasia would have on that system? The third thing is that they actually, I think I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say they didn't adequately consider this, but there's a chance that they were just lying to us. The third thing is did they adequately consider that this conversation that they're talking about, where they promised us that everyone would have a choice at end of life, whether they wanted palliative care or euthanasia death, did they really believe that that was true? Did they really believe that all Canadians were going to have a choice of euthanasia or palliative care? Or did they know that only 30% of Canadians at that time even had access to palliative care? Now I'm beginning, you know what, I don't always, I got to go out on a limb on this one. They knew because there was a parliamentary report back in 2011 that said that Canadians in Canada, us as citizens of Canada, only 30% of us had access to palliative care. We actually passed, just to give you an idea of this, how come I think I'm right on this, is that we actually passed a bill requiring us to develop a palliative care strategy after we actually legalized euthanasia. So that's kind of like, if you promised us when you legalized euthanasia that don't worry about it, we're just not going to offer you euthanasia at end of life, you're going to have other choices like palliative care, then they knew at the time that we didn't have adequate palliative care in Canada to offer all Canadians. So that is the backdrop. That forms a backdrop. So they did not adequately consider the backdrop that they were introducing this into. What else didn't they do? They didn't prioritize protecting the vulnerable citizens among us. And I know that for a fact myself, because here in our organization, I actually head up a citizen action organization. We published something called the 27 points checklist. Now the 27 points checklist, let me give you an idea what that is that when the federal government launched their euthanasia legislation, so they were going to legalize euthanasia, we started seeing other provinces, the provincial level of government, they started to put together their their euthanasia regime and their legislation. And the first province that was out of the gate was the province of Quebec. So Quebec actually passed their euthanasia legislation before the federal government even passed theirs. Well, all we did was we took a look at the euthanasia legislation federally, and we took a look at the euthanasia legislation that was passed in the province of Quebec, and we took a look at the gap in protection for the vulnerable people that live among us in our communities. And we came up with 27 things that the federal government would need to do to close the gap to adequately protect the vulnerable that live among us in our communities. Let me give you an example. This is the very first thing on the list. The very first thing, if you want to protect the vulnerable and you want to go ahead with euthanasia, was we said that the federal government had to make sure that there was a requirement that there was a complete set of regulations in place for the entire euthanasia process and not just guidelines for defined parts of the process. So now, doesn't that make sense that this is such a serious conversation that they're having on euthanasia, that you would want a complete set of guidelines in place that and set of regulations in place? Doesn't that make sense? But they didn't. They didn't even have adequate oversight in place, which is another one of our points here, that you make sure that you put the oversight of this process in place before you allow the process to unfold, so that we have adequate, people checking in on this to make sure. We also wanted to take a look at, we actually said this is a really important part is that you actually define the conscience rights of all of the medical professionals as part of the process, so that we would have a balance of services available. Like, for example, one of the things is I wanted to make sure if I get vulnerable, if I am actually in a place of vulnerability, I want to make sure that my family doctor and has an understanding with me that you do not euthanize me. Like, I am not a euthanasia patient, period. So I want to make sure that those doctors are available out there to provide for my protection if I actually get into a difficult space in my life. That's important to protect the vulnerable, is to provide for the conscience rights for doctors. So anyway, I'm going to give you a copy of these 27 points that will clearly demonstrate to you that they did not prioritize protecting the vulnerable. As a matter of fact, Minister Jane Philpott, in an interview one day, stood up in front of the camera and said that she had felt that the federal Liberal government had struck an appropriate balance between protecting the vulnerable and providing access for medical aid in dying for those people that wanted to hasten their own death. A balance. She said she balanced off protecting the vulnerable with providing this access to medical aid in dying. That's not a position that we take and we actually support as members of the faith community in Canada. You don't just carve out the end of the list here and say, okay, well, these vulnerable people, yeah, sure, they're going to die and it's not going to be right, but you know what, we had to balance off the rights of the vulnerable. But we don't think like that. You have to protect the vulnerable, especially protect the vulnerable in our communities, period. That's the third pillar. Okay, number 4. They didn't deviate from their plan through the whole process. They did not go off their plan. They said they were going to do it, and they did it. And if you take a look at the timeline of how fast it moved through the House of Commons into the Senate and how it came out of the Senate, they did not deviate from their plan at all. So kudos for them. But here we are now, years later, and what are they going to be doing? They're going to be expanding the eligibility of euthanasia to include people that aren't even near end of life. They're going to actually, right now, there's a conversation going on where you can take that reasonably foreseeable condition, which is under the euthanasia, the current laws, it says that your death has to be reasonably foreseeable. But they're talking about creating another track where you can, if you just want to end your life and your death isn't reasonably foreseeable, you can still get on a different track and still be euthanized. Second thing is they're having a conversation about expanding it to include children and the mentally ill. See, these are the kinds of things that are happening in Canada, but if you don't understand what they didn't do the first time, you won't know what to expect and require from those you elect to serve you in civil government in the future. So that's why we're having the conversation. This is my segue into the next segment, because we are about to elect a leader of a political party. And it is critical that we understand what's in that person's head when it comes to issues like euthanasia and how they prioritize protecting the vulnerable. Is it a priority for them, or are they just working a plan? Because if they're just working their plan to achieve all these other objectives that they aren't discussing with us, then that's not good enough. We want to make sure that our priorities to provide for the safety and security of the citizens are paramount in the minds of the person who's elected. And that's why we are engaged, Operation Engage. We are engaged in the conversation inside the Conservative Party of Canada, because the person that's going to be elected is going to be in that high office, the office of Prime Minister. And that person is going to have great weight when it comes to issues like euthanasia. So this is important for us to understand. I wanted to make sure we're covered on that, to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes we made before by putting these people in office so that they could do this to the vulnerable people that live among us in our communities. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break here and introduce. We're going to go to conservativeupdate.com, and I'm going to spend the rest of our time in the boardroom showing us how we can increase our influence in this realm of politics within the Conservative Party of Canada, and we can help them pick the next leader of the party and the next Prime Minister of Canada. Talk to you shortly. Okay, we're back here. So we are going to be talking now for the remainder of our time here on two things. We're going to be reviewing the goals and objectives of Operation Engage so that we're all on the same page until the next midweek touch point. And then we're also going to be talking about the candidates themselves. And I'm going to answer this all important question for you, which is, where are they at? Where are the candidates at right now? We're going to peel back the onion for you a little bit on that one, or maybe pull back the curtain for all of you that maybe aren't as familiar with political campaigns. I'm going to climb inside the heads of the candidates for you and show you around a little bit as to where the candidates are at. Anyway, from my perspective anyway, and through the lens of my experience, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I think they're thinking right now. So anyway, let's take a look at Operation Engage. Remember, the goals and objectives. First is that we want to open a dialogue. Second is we want to share our ideas. The third is we want to find the common ground between us. And then fourth is we want to move forward unified with other members in the Conservative Party of Canada towards the election. Now, this is our goals and objectives, which is really, really simple. It's all outlined on conservativeupdate.com. You can go to that website, of course, and review it all there. It's on the very front page of the website. You can take people to that website and show them the goals and objectives. We aren't hiding anything here. I do get a few people that are kind of used to being around the political circles. They go, Doug, really, what are you up to? Like, what's really going on? And I go, look, there's no hidden agenda. It is all out front. We are not hiding a thing. It's on the website. Whatever, if it's not there, it's not happening. So anyway, so let's now take a look, though, that when you come on, like let's say you are brand new, and you know what, on this particular national leadership briefing, there is a good chance you are brand new, because it's going like this every single week. We've got so many new people joining us. So here is what I'm going to tell you, the new person, that you need to do immediately on the road ahead. Okay, first of all, join the movement. Now that just simply, you've already done that. You're here. You are a part of our conversation. We're talking, we're in relationship. Now you can choose to come back. I hope you do. But you have joined a movement of people, that a bunch of people that have the same goals, that we have the same desires in our hearts. We want to see the 4 pillars advanced in society, culture, politics, and government. This is the movement. This is our opportunity to come together. So join the movement. That's the first part of it. The second thing is we need you to go to the website, conservativeupdate.com, and actually review the platform. Like, have a look at it. There's different ways you can review it. You can go to the first page of conservativeupdate.com and go all the way to the bottom, and then it's got the platform policies and stuff broken out into the pillars. Or you can go to the top index tab and you can look under Common Ground Platform. And then it lays out all of the different individual policies for you, or platform ideas there. But have a look at it. And as you're reading through these things, I want you to be asking yourself the all-important question. If you elected somebody to be the Prime Minister of Canada that liked these ideas, would that be okay with you? If, in other words, if you shared these views and values that were represented in these ideas with the person who is running the country, would that be okay with you? So if you like these ideas and you want to advance these ideas, we are doing that right now as part of the process of Operation Engage, and on that website, conservativeupdate.com. So join the movement. You're here, you're in, review the platform, but then we want to actually take action and demonstrate to others that we support these ideas. It's one thing for you to quietly go home and say, you know what, I love Doug, I love you, I love the plan, I love everything about it. I'm gonna go home and pray about it in my house, and I'm gonna close the door and not tell anybody. That's good, but better is when you actually stand out in front and are willing to say, you know what, I support these ideas, and I am willing to support the candidate who supports these ideas. That is an important part, and you can do that on the Register tab on the conservativeupdate.com website. And then the fourth thing is share the good news, because you have just, as I pointed out in the last midweek touch point, you have just discovered an opportunity where you can stand with thousands of people across the nation who share your views and values on the issues related to parental authority, your right of freedom of religion, protecting the vulnerable, how you feel they should be taken care of, and then the desire for our future generations not to be saddled with this excessive yoke of taxation. You have just joined arms with all of these people across the country who share your views on these issues. Why wouldn't you share that good news with someone else and invite them to do the same? So this is an important part of it. As a matter of fact, they're all important, because then once that person joins the movement, they're going to review the platform, they're going to register their support, and they're going to share the good news. And it just goes on and on and on. Now, we got a tight timeline, so please don't spend too much time right brain, left brain thinking this thing through. It's not that complex. We just want you to get in there, see if you like the ideas. If you do, say so and tell somebody. That's all it is. It's not complicated. So this is the core of the whole plan right here. Now, I told you I was going to climb inside the head of the candidates right now to let you know where we're at. As much as the process, the road we're on is short. We got like less than 6 weeks left before the cutoff of when people can buy memberships to actually receive a ballot. So it is a tight timeline. I'm not gonna fool with anybody on that. I mean, I'm emphasizing it every time. But to the candidate, inside the candidate's head, every step they take on this road has to be one that doesn't end their campaign. In other words, they have to be very careful and cautious. They're inside their head. They're thinking, man, I better not blow this, or I better not blow that. Like, I mean, I got a long road till the time those ballots hit the mail, and I can make a ton of mistakes between now and then. And I got to be real cautious about how I handle every interview and all this stuff. So they are in hypersensitivity mode to making mistakes, and they don't want to make any. So that's why what you're going to see here on the immediate road ahead is you're going to see candidates that are kind of sort of playing a little bit cagey and cautious about jumping in and aligning themselves with these ideas that are represented on the platform. So now what I mean by that is that they've got to make, they want to feel this whole thing out, and they don't want to make a commitment statement to support things like the Vulnerable Persons Protection Act, which is a part of the platform that we proposed. Is they don't want to actually come out and just go, yeah, I'm all about that right away, unless they have to, because every single step, they got to make sure they don't make any mistakes, and they don't have to make that decision until later. So they're kind of playing a wait and see. Also, another thing that's inside their head right now, I guarantee you this is inside their head, because of the way we've structured this, where the support for the platform is growing and growing every single day. More and more people are getting added in. They're kind of playing the wait and see game and kind of going, now, do these guys really have the ability to put over 150,000 people together in a room in support of these ideas? Because if they can only put 25 people in a room, then, which by the way, that's a bad number because we passed that a long time ago. But if they can only put a sort of some people in a room, then I don't have to pay as much attention to them as if they put a lot of people in the room. So I can tell you right now, these candidates inside their head, they're going, how big is this thing gonna get? Well, of course, if you ask me and you ask the people that I hang around with that are watching this thing do this, it's getting big. It's getting real big, real fast, because people are sharing the good news out there. They are inviting people to join the movement. They are inviting people to come and take a look at the platform, and they like the ideas. But I don't blame the candidates if they want to play a little cagey and kind of sit back and hold back a bit before they actually express their support for the ideas. But I guarantee you, they're all watching it and they're all aware of this. I want you to know that every single campaign is aware of what you're doing here on this website here, and they want to see how many people you're sharing it with and how big it gets. And they want to, but now once it's where it reaches that critical mass, where they see in their own minds, where they see with their own eyes that these ideas are ideas that are popular across the nation, that parents all across the nation have a burning desire in their hearts to have the authority preserved and protected to raise their kids the way they want. Parents want to raise their kids with the same faith tradition and with the same values all across the nation. This is not just reserved for like just some Christians here or some Jews here or Sikhs or Muslims. I mean, because these ideas are popular ideas. And the reason I know that is because they came from you. And I've been listening to you for years now. And this is what you've been telling me. I have confidence in your ideas. I believe they're going to eventually pick them up. So that's what's in the minds of the candidates right now. All these guys are going to have an opportunity to speak to you directly, and you're going to be able to make your decision as to who you want to represent your views and values, and who you believe, more importantly, is willing to represent your views and values on the issues especially that are important to you. So this is exciting, but we can't, I don't want to hear any negative talk out there about candidates who aren't jumping on board really quick. Give us some time. They're just doing what politicians need to do as part of the candidacy process, and they want to be careful. So I'm happy with that. So anyway, so that is where I want to leave it today. But I want to just finish up with this one reminder that we do have a midweek touch point coming up again next Wednesday. So you're going to be receiving the midweek touch point on Wednesday to your email box. If you want anybody else to receive that midweek touch point, that brief video middle of the week to encourage people to move forward and help them understand where we're at in the process, then make sure they get registered for the National Leadership Briefing, or have them go online and register their support for the platform at conservativeupdate.com. If you're on either of those two registration pages, you are definitely going to receive that touch point in the middle of the week. And we're going to continue to stay in touch on this road ahead to make sure that we are exercising maximum influence on the outcome of this Conservative Party of Canada leadership election race. Why again? Because the person who's going to be elected to that position is going to have extraordinary power and authority to make decisions that are either going to negatively or positively impact the lives of our neighbor. And you're called to care about your neighbor, and I want to help you care for your neighbor by helping you make a good decision on E-Day as to who to vote for. So anyway, Hope that helps today. Thank you so much for your time. God bless you. God bless your family. And may God continue to bless this great nation of Canada. Boy, I love Canada, the people in it. Anyway, have a great day, and we'll see you midweek next week on the Midweek Touchpoint. Bye for now.